How's your day going, MBA hopefuls? My name is Eric Lucrezia, and you are live on MBA Waves. And today's episode is all about the GMAT. Today's topic is called 4 Modes to Study the GMAT, which is right for you. And I want to introduce today's 2 guests. First, we have Dr. Karen Van Hook. I'm not sure if I pronounced your name correctly, who's joining us from Boston and works also with City Test Prep. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit, Karen?
Yeah, I'm a linguist originally, got a PhD in linguistics, specializing in English grammar, and so I'm really into the verbal stuff. And I've been teaching the verbal section of the GMAT for City Test Prep for quite a few years now. I think
since 2005.
Yeah. So that's my story.
I want to say it's been a couple years. I want to say I've known Karen for a really long time. Amazing person and awesome tutor. And she wrote a 400-page book on pronouns before pronouns were a thing, right?
Yes.
So she is a trendsetter in the field. And I also worked on a GMAT book together published by Miller Press. So we've been working together quite some time and have been friends for a really long time too. So I'm excited to share the screen with her.
Yay.
Well, anyone who can produce 400 pages on a part of speech has got my vote. That's impressive. I gotta check that out. All right. Also with us is Derrick Haynes. Derrick Haynes.
Yeah. Thanks for the intro, Eric. So I'm actually in Barcelona right now. So on your side of the world too, Eric. And it's great out here. I'm actually doing a study abroad during my MBA. So I'm an MBA student at Fuqua School of Business at Duke University in North Carolina. I'm in my 2nd year there. And prior to business school, I was actually a math teacher, and that led me to my role at Magoosh as a GMAT test prep expert. And I focus on the quant section. And a little known fact, prior to being a teacher, I was actually an investment banker for 7 years. So happy to talk a little bit about that as well as the GMAT. So really excited for this conversation and 400-page paper. Wow. I am thoroughly impressed and happy to collab with you and share our GMAT knowledge.
Yeah, you bring a lot of things to the table there. So banker, teacher, math teacher. I guess you're probably pretty strong on the quant. So you guys kind of complement each other pretty well here in the GMAT conversation. But you represent a test prep company, Magoosh. You guys might know this company. I know it from the app. It's like probably the most expensive app out there, but it is a very thorough and very useful tool. And you also are a current student in an MBA at Duke, as you said, and currently on exchange to Desade. So you could talk about a lot of different things today. But we're going to focus on the GMAT, and I want to let Bara take away the topic to introduce these 4 modes of study, or these 4 ways to prepare.
Yeah, there's so much to say about the GMAT, and there's so much to say about studying. And usually when students start their process and applying to business school, they realize that they can't just look at schools. They actually have to think about their way that they are going to get the best score on the GMAT. And then they freak out and they don't know what to do. So we thought that this would be a great topic to really think about. How are people going to approach studying? Are they going to do it themselves, thinking they can handle everything, buy a book, buy a third-party book, or even just buy the official guide? Are they going to do a live online course or a live in-person course that's a group? Are they going to work with a tutor, or are they going to just put the book under their pillow and hope for the best, right? So what I want to do is get into the weeds and not necessarily talk about the individual questions or the individual makeup of the test, but really how can we think about the GMAT? How can we help the students think about and what's going to be the best way for them to study? So are there any other ways of studying that I didn't mention? I mean, I guess there's apps, right? You could just use your phone to study. I mean, that seems kind of difficult for scratch paper, but are there any other ways of studying? The answer might be no, that you can think of.
Yeah, just a couple of nuances.
There's actually, there was actually another way I would like to add, Bara, and that's studying within a group, right? So working along a team, finding a group, and I found that very helpful because the GMAT study is one that is a marathon. And working alongside a group of teams, it really helps out a lot. And we try to aim to do that in our Magoosh Live classes, is find ways to connect students across the globe and create that level of support that you need to get across the finish line.
the thing that's so great about that also is you're going to be doing that in business school, right? And so if you have any sort of challenges with working with people or social awkwardness, you can actually start to deal with that in the group setting of preparing for the GMAT. So it's killing two birds, one stone, right? That's the saying.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Okay, but don't kill any birds doing this. Like animal cruelty free podcast. Vidcast. Okay, so what about the pros and cons then of the different methods that I studied? Like, what are the pros of working in a group or working just with a book? Are there any pros or cons that you can think about for the folks that are listening?
I got something. I find there are some people who can be okay with just the book, but for a lot of people, I think that's really not the most efficient, because people have a tendency to burn up a lot of time and energy looking at the wrong things, looking anything from the reading passages to the sentence correction. There's a particular way that you need to focus your attention. There's a particular way to look at the questions so that you can really efficiently get at what they're asking. I wouldn't go quite so far as to say that the GMAT is formulaic, but it's kind of close. And when people are studying all by themselves, they're looking often, not everybody, but a lot of them, they're looking in the wrong part of the passage. They're spending time thinking about things in the sentence correction that couldn't possibly be the key to the answer, and so forth. And when people have a group or when they have a tutor, then they've got people who could help point them. And my experience is more as a tutor is say, don't look at that part, focus right here. Don't waste your time thinking about that. What you want to be thinking about is this. And I think that's people will get much more, most people will just get a lot more bang for their buck if they have somebody else helping them to see what they're supposed to be looking at, as opposed to just tackling it straight from the book.
So Karen, could you break that down for some people in the audience who might be wondering, what do you mean by formulaic in the GMAT?
Well, what I mean is that there's certain things that they're always looking for in these questions. It's not to the point that you could just memorize simple little formulas, but they do have typical ways of thinking. When they're asking you to identify an assumption, for example, in the critical reasoning, I hope this isn't getting too much into the weeds, but they're often saying, here's a little argument, find the assumption. And a lot of people at first are like, what do they mean, the assumption? Like, what is the assumption? And it's a way in which they've skipped a step in the argument. Like the argument would have made perfect sense, except they skipped something. And when people are trying to figure it out just from looking at the book, often they're looking all over the place. Like, what do they mean by an assumption? And if you've got somebody else to help you, they can show you, this is the kind of thing you should be thinking about. And once you get into the groove, you actually, after you've done enough of these questions, you really start to develop this feeling, this is the kind of thing they're going to want. This is what they're thinking. It's going to be one of these. They got a mentality that stays fairly consistent, from question to question, and people can pick up on that.
Yeah, because an assumption is not stated, right? And so
right, the assumption's a step that they skipped. It'll be something like the simple question. It'll say something like, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not going to say it in GMAT language, but it'll say something like, it would be great if there were tsunami warning sensors all along the coast, because then when a tsunami was coming, people could start to evacuate, and then a whole lot less people would get killed by tsunamis. Well, that made sense, kind of, sort of, almost. They're saying, great, have the warning. Then people could start evacuating when they hear the warning. Then less people will get killed. But they left out some stuff. Like, how much warning do you get? Like, if the alarm only goes off 3 seconds before the tsunami hits, that's not going to help. Or maybe the alarm goes off with just enough time that a whole lot of people are going to run around in a panic and get in car accidents and get killed trying to get away. Like, they skipped a bunch of steps. So your first reaction is, yeah, sounds good. But what?
I said, or even that we're assuming that it's a tsunami prone region of the world. I mean, so all of this is strategy. And I think that's what you guys do. you've identified the patterns, which makes me think of formulaic again. But anyway, you identify these patterns, and as someone with experience, you can show that, and that's the advantage of working with a coach, actually. So I'm going to sit down with you, like, this is what you need to look for, and you'll start to recognize that yourself. And also, that's like confidence building. That's what I was going to add to that. What you had said is like, you repeat something enough, you get good at it, you feel more confident. And I think that is kind of everything in everything we approach in life. If you feel confident, you're going to do it better. It'll just flow easily.
I want to say one other thing that I think is, I would bet you that Derrick and Karen would agree. And Karen, you mentioned about burning through questions and burning through content. I really want to emphasize, sometimes when people are studying alone, they think that if they keep on doing questions, that they're going to somehow magically understand what's going on. And then they blow through the official guide, they blow through whatever material they have. And then when it's time to study, all of a sudden they have to go back to what they've already imprinted in their mind. Right. Yeah. And so the other, I think, con about studying on your own, even though people can do it and they have our blessing, it's that you might not be studying smarter, which is what you were talking about. They're studying harder, and then they've blown through some really good quality content and material.
So
sorry. No, I've already talked a lot. I just want to say one thing. Sometimes when they're going through super fast like that, they accidentally give themselves the mistaken impression that the whole thing depends on magic or luck, because they're not picking up the patterns. They're just burning through material. And it does not depend on magic or luck.
No, I very much identify with that as well. And it kind of connects with the thought that just came to mind when we talked about the pros and cons of the various different study styles. So I look at the approach to the GMAT as a progression towards being a sufficient self test taker on your own. And so in the beginning, there is really a level of self-reflection that needs to happen, where you identify what are your strengths and weaknesses as a student. Are you a student that enjoys, working through a textbook by themselves and kind of working through that pattern of like learning different tactics to approach questions and the summation there? I'm a more visual and learner, so I like really strongly with Magoosh the videos for every question that was presented, where I was able to hear someone talk through a question methodically, but also have a written text that works for me. And in addition to that, there's also the live classes, as mentioned, where you get a chance to physically sit in a class, talk to someone, ask those questions that are very nuanced, and really get that level of definition there. And I see a proper test regimen of study going through all three of those processes and touching on them all as you grow and develop. And what I look at when it comes to the official guide, you should cherish those questions like a piece of gold. One way to think about the way the GMAT works is that the exam is created by test writers, right? And so test writers have these simple set of this very finite set of questions that are written by the test preparers, and these are high level questions, which you should approach these as nuggets of just getting as close as you can to the exam and really thoroughly combing through that process and really fine tuning your skills there. So when it looks for concepts like assumptions or factorials, maybe taking a step back and practicing with the test prep materials and getting a sound understanding of how to find an assumption or how to, break down a prime factorization of a very unique number, and then practicing there. And then as you move closer and closer to the test date, sprinkling in the official guide questions, all to the point that you get to a level where you're only doing official guide questions in a time practice set, and really prepare yourself. But I also agree, a lot of students that I work with go all the way through the official guide one time and miss out on all that key information. But also going through those questions one time is not enough. You need to do questions over and over and over again. And that repetition is really going to build confidence, but also that identification, hate to say it, but the formulaic process that is with any standardized test, from the SAT all the way up to the LSAT, GMAT, or so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And because we haven't mentioned it yet, but because you have easy, medium, and hard questions that go through, you touched on this, Derrick, that you have some foundational knowledge that you actually use in the beginning, and everything is built on that, right? So it's not like you're going to start off with a question that's like the hardest question on the test, but the test is constantly adapting to your knowledge base and seeing really where you fit in. It's a computer adaptive test. And yeah, that's one point I wanted to bring up.
I say that's key, and you all working in the test prep space may have this feeling, right? So I meet students, and every time I meet a student, they'll message me in the chat from a online class, and they'll say, I want to see all the 700 level questions, right? And the problem is that that's not how the GMAT kind of works, right? So you can get all the 700 level questions right, but if you miss the 500 level questions, you'll never see the 700 level questions. So I look at it almost like a Super Mario video game, right? You go through level 1, 2, 3, and then you get up to the boss Bowser, and then you try your luck there. So you have to really move through the progression of the exam in a very comfortable flow, and being open to the fact that it's building blocks. And so as you master the 500, 600, and then you hit the 700 level questions, know that you are enriching yourself as you go through the process. So yes, the 700 questions come up all the time.
First of all, I love Mario Brothers, so thank you for bringing that up. And you guys, like Mario Kart is like my jam. But anyway, you mentioned already so many great little pearls of wisdom related to the GMAT, and we've talked about learning style. And I think knowing your own learning style, what works best for you, you have to take that into account when you think about your approach. Again, if you're for a class in person or online, small group, app, whatever it may be, books, and so forth. But I wanted to ask this kind of very fundamental question for people listening today and watching. What is the best way for a student to begin? Like, where's the starting point? What do you think? What's your advice, the three of you, being test prep experts?
I concur with what Derrick says. You want to know what your strengths and weaknesses are at the beginning, right? So what we do is we do an evaluation in the beginning. I'm sure that Magoosh does something similar. Any tutoring program or tutor worth their salt is going to see where the student is and getting that snapshot and understanding, is this a content mastery issue? Is this a strategy issue? Is it a reasoning issue? Because the GMAT in large part is a reasoning test, not just how much you know about combinations or verb tenses. It is reasoning, and getting out of what are those like those escape rooms, right? Have you heard of that? It's like each question really is not just testing the one thing that it looks like it's testing. It's actually indicative of something else. And so getting also, what is your timing like? Like, we do speed reading because we know that we can if we could push people to move faster through it, they have more time to reason and think. And then also mindset. It's exactly what you brought up, Eric, the confidence, right? Does the student feel in control? Do they feel confident? Do they feel focused? Or are they freaking out because they just hate taking tests, right? So we deal with all four. And so starting out knowing exactly what you said, Derrick, that soul searching, right? Like that, like, who are you as you approach the test? And then addressing the areas that you need to work on and making sure that your strengths are for real, right? Like, or was it just lucky that day?
Yeah.
What about the other two guys in the room? Anything to add about like the starting point? What's your best advice for somebody who's just going to attack it for the first time? What's the best thing you can do to start?
Oh, really? I think Bara said it better than I could. I would say take a diagnostic, like from the official guide, or but something, and see, like, what do you think of it? What was your experience like? How did you do on timing? How did the questions seem? How, just gather your impressions, and then, your impressions of what the experience was like and what you thought, and then look at what the diagnostic information is. Were you strong in some areas? Were you weak in some areas? Were you, strong across the board or weak across the board? I mean, that's the first step, is you've got to have an encounter with some kind of a diagnostic so that you can start to get oriented to figure out what you need to do.
And the patterns, like when we do an evaluation, we look at, are there patterns in the way that people answer? Like, are they always getting number 4 wrong in each of the sections? And if they are, maybe their energy is somehow slowing down. So it's not even something that a computer can pick up when you do computerized ones. It's actually looking to see. And Karen, I love what you said. Like, how do you feel about it, right? You might have gotten it right, but you might not know what you did at all. So it's really like this multi-layer, very meta experience.
Yes.
Absolutely. So with our live classes now, over the year, we have instituted a class 0, right? And in this class 0, in addition to taking a diagnostic exam, we also have a GMAT blog that's chock full of information on Magoosh's website, where we talk about just that mindset. And we actually have some YouTube videos talking about it as well. Going into it with the mindset of, hey, I'm making a commitment to run this marathon, right? At day 1, you will not be able to run 26 and a half miles of a marathon, or, so forth. You have to take step 1. And so much of GMAT success we talk about is understanding how the GMAT will fit into your lifestyle, not making the GMAT your entire life. And that proper balance of finding ways of simple exercises, mindfulness, taking a deep breath, and getting comfortable, and just finding ways to keep yourself mentally, physically, and even socially healthy to approach this exam that is going to take a lot of time and energy, but it is just one step in the holistic process of your application. So I agree with everything that was said, and then also bringing in that component of you as an individual and making sure you're taking care of yourself and not, neglecting yourself, so that you could be your best self as you approach the exam.
Yeah,
I love that. It's so much about balance. I know Bara has a lot of things to say about mindfulness and incorporating all those techniques to keep you stress-free during this process. But a lot of my clients, when I'm working, so I do admissions consulting, and my clients very often start off with this very, I would say, GMAT, rankings, and scholarship focused mindset, and they forget some major pieces, like starting with themselves and this journey that is the MBA application process. And the starting point has to be with you. Like, who are you? What do you want to do in this life? Like, what are your goals? Like, you have this opportunity, a once in a lifetime opportunity. Hopefully you're doing the MBA only once, to transform yourself, catapult your career to the next level. And you have to put some time and thought and energy into figuring out the right destination for you. And what is the school that's going to get you there, right? Each school, each program out there is a vehicle, a vessel to get you to the next step in your career. And so taking that time to reflect and not getting overwhelmed obsessively by those 3 things, which tend to be in the forefront of a lot of people's minds, which are often the GMAT or GRE, the rankings, which I always say are a great place to start and a horrible place to finish. They don't give so many details about what the programs offer and how they correspond to your personal and professional goals and scholarships, which money is very important. And before I talk about money in this, I just wanted to mention that a lot of people hesitate between the GMAT and the GRE. Today's episode is much more focused on the GMAT, but the GRE is also another option. And in terms of taking diagnostics, like Karen mentioned, all of you have been saying, basically do a diagnostic. Fair enough. I think you should do a diagnostic of both of them. And there are some other options out there. We're not really going to get into the EA today, the executive assessment. It's more for the MBAs, and there's a couple of full-time MBA programs now that are accepting it. But besides that, I wanted to ask the room, how do you guys deal when you have a student or an MBA applicant who doesn't have the time or the money to invest in like proper preparation or coaching or training, however you want to call it?
So may I ask for a bit more clarity on the time component? Are they like bumping against a deadline, or they feel that work? Like, so I just want to,
there's a deadline they're trying to make and it's pretty tight, but they want to go for it. Or they have a very prohibitive work schedule, which includes maybe taking care of children, sick parents, who knows what. Life is busy and it's super hard. And that's also why, as when I was working in recruitment in the past, in my former life, so many people I would meet at those fairs, maybe half, who would say, yeah, I'm planning to do an MBA next year. They actually end up applying the year after because they don't realize how much time it takes to properly do that research, to write the essays, to do the GMAT, to all those things. while working and living life. So time is a thing for many reasons, but this is sort of hypothetical. In terms of money, who may or may not have the money to invest in a tutor. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to let's talk about financing. I think that may be one that may be a more succinct answer and approach there. So do your research, see what materials that are offered for free. Not every free material has the same level of quality. I just want to give that level of understanding because we are approaching a degree that is for executives, right? So there is a level of understanding that there's a financial commitment. Magoosh does a great job of democratizing GMAT test prep with being a provider that is a very cost efficient for the level of material that is provided on our app and other resources that are available to students. But I do want to make sure that it's clear that there is a level of cost that is connected to the exam, and you just take time to really look through that. Shouldn't stop you from pursuing, but it should be something to take consideration, just as well as time. Magoosh shares different structures for a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month process of studying that aligns with our product. But I would say that the idea of time can sometimes be conflated with success, and that, you know, staying in the library on Saturday for 5 hours could be a not as great use of time as studying 2 hour, like an hour or two every night leading up to the weekend. So with time and money, you want to be cautious of how you're spending it, but don't let the lack of any of those resources or the diminishing of those resources stop you from the pursuit of the MBA, because there are material and people out there that can find helpful ways for you to approach it.
That's a really interesting point. I asked the room again, as the GMAT experts. This is not my domain. Do you find in general, and this is generalization, but like most candidates or applicants do better with GMAT results when they do 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, or more like 5 hours 1 day a week? Which is the better? Or is it
1 hour, 5 days a week? And in fact, I was going to say, like, sometimes I get people who have really heavy work commitments and they can't even do an hour a day. But that's where studying smarter rather than harder comes in. Like if they even just I had one student who could just do a few problems on her lunch hour. But the key was, don't grind through a pile of problems mindlessly, but reflect. Why was that the right answer? Even sometimes I would urge her, pretend for a moment you're the tutor. And half an hour from now, you have to get online and explain to somebody why that was the right answer and the other ones were wrong. Because putting yourself in that kind of a position mentally for a moment gets you up on your toes. And a person can make a fair bit of progress even on a pretty tight schedule if they're studying in that kind of efficient, focused, like, yeah, I'm ready to defend this answer. I know what's right. I know why the others were wrong. And that's way better than saying, I've got 5 hours and I'll grind through this until I fall asleep over the book and I wouldn't really be able to tell you anything. You see what I mean? So yeah, study smarter rather than longer.
I like that.
Yeah, and I think what I want to add too is that when you have a company like Magoosh or some of the larger companies, they do have a lot of resources, right? They have a lot of resources and a lot of the videos that you're talking about and moving through it. So that is going to be a really awesome resource for someone who's good with self-studying and doesn't need a lot of hand-holding. Whereas what we offer is probably going to take less time because it's so getting in the weeds of the individual issue that's coming up for the student. So based on where you are, like, you might actually not spend that much more doing private tutoring, but you'll have far fewer hours because we're just really efficient. We're not giving you we're giving you what you need, not giving you everything that's there. And I mean, I can't speak for Magoosh, but I do know I work for Princeton Review, and it was like, well, here's everything. Like, here's everything, and you will get some guidelines and some movement and working with people, but it just depends on how you're going to best use the time that you do have, because you might do best by like pulling out 3 videos, or you might do best by working with a tutor and going over those 3 things, right? So Yeah, please, Karen.
I'm sorry I'm jumping in, but I feel so strongly about this. Yeah, this is a big part of what I enjoy about tutoring. And one of the big benefits for people who like this kind of thing is that we're on Zoom, and frequently I'm looking at like where the person's eyes are tracking, because, you know, when you're working on one of these reading passages, there's only certain parts that you need to be looking at for a particular question. And I'll be going like, what are you looking at right this minute? No, don't look there, because the question was like this. Look only at this part. Or we'll be doing critical reasoning, the logic puzzles. And I'll say, how are you visualizing the problem? And it turns out that they were visualizing it in a way that was really unhelpful. So it's like often people have little knots in their thinking or subtle inefficiencies where they're looking the wrong way, either metaphorically or literally looking in the wrong part of the passage. And a lot of the joy of tutoring and what makes it effective is that it's possible to find out in dialogue and correct the person at that kind of micro level. And of course, a book that's written for everybody can't do that. They just have to put out everything. So, you know, they have no idea whether you tend to think like too vaguely, too much in generalization, or whether you're one of the people who gets all hung up on details that are totally irrelevant. And a tutor could find out quickly which one it is and correct where you focus your attention. So it's effective.
In real time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I wanted to ask the question because we have like a few minutes left. What about some surprises? What are some of the unexpected things that students or candidates come across, and like, how do you address them? How do you help them overcome them? You know what I mean? Like, what are some of the most surprising things people don't consider in their GMAT prep? Come on.
I think the thing that most students probably don't consider is the amount of time it takes to prepare for the GMAT. I believe that what happens often with students that I've worked with before is they'll hear about my success or they hear about success of another student, and they want a cookie cutter way of kind of mimicking that level of success. And then also the level of work that you have to kind of do alone to get to that level of like expertise. So when I've worked with students in a tutoring capacity, the ask is always, you know, how do I get this score? But to really like develop a successful testing program, you have to like, for lack of a better term, painstakingly go over the same level of questions over and over and over again, not necessarily because you don't know the answer, but because you have to have a level of creativity that comes with like the switching up of the way of solving the problem. So what I think that a Magoosh platform offers that is really cool is that we're able to take a question that you may have about one of the questions in the product and give you a detailed answer using different scenarios that may change the outcome of the answer, but allows you to think about it in a very flexible way. I believe we was mentioning before that level of reasoning going into the quant section has more to do with reasoning versus a math test. Remember, it's an executive level of thinking. So the biggest surprise is that most students probably believe that this process, they read on YouTube how to get a 750 in 3 weeks. And honestly, it's out there, just like it's, you know, how to lose 50 pounds in, you know, a month, right? Like it's like, you know, answers like that, right? So the amount of time, so whatever time that you have going into it, I would say like multiply that by 1.3, 1.5, just to give yourself a bit of a cushion or a buffer so that you could successfully prepare for the exam and do your very best.
Yeah, I think what surprises, sorry.
People take it twice. Very often people take it a second time. So speaking of buffers, like factor in that time to do it again. And I don't want to interrupt Karen anymore. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Sorry, Dave. Yeah, I just wanted to answer the question about what surprises people. I don't think they often express it exactly as surprise, but I know that it's something that they have to get used to, is the extent to which they need to get on the wavelength of the GMAT test writers. And like, people don't realize that. Like they may think at first, oh, it's some sort of a general test, like they know there's sentence correction. It's something about grammar. And they start thinking, but I don't remember my grammar from high school. Yeah, but that doesn't matter because that isn't exactly what they're testing. I mean, there's a relationship, but it doesn't matter. I told you I have a PhD in linguistics. I'm a specialist in English grammar. When I first looked at the sentence correction questions about 20 years ago, before I was working with you, Bara, first time I looked, I was just like, what? They want what? And then I quickly caught on. But my point is, it's not a general test of whether you memorized grammar rules out of some other book somewhere or whether you remember grammar rules from some class somewhere else. It's about what grammar rules are these guys hung up on? What grammar rules are they looking for? What kind of a thing do they keep throwing at you? How are they trying to trick you? Huh? What?
Hopefully prepositions.
Yeah.
You seem to know a lot about those.
So in other words, it's about getting on their wavelength. And I agree with you, Derrick, about what you were saying about how you study, that you're learning to be flexible in your thinking. There's a dimension to it. If people are just blasting through and going, okay, well, whoops, I picked D, but that was B. Well, okay. No, that's useless. When you get one wrong or even when you get one right, that's an opportunity for you to be adjusting your thinking like, oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, that's why that was the wrong answer. Yeah, I see how they were trying to trick me. You see? And I think people don't always realize how much it's about tuning up your reasoning skills, sharpening up your reasoning skills, but in particular, sharpening them up in a way that gets you ready for what these test writers are going to throw at you,
I'll even take it a step further, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole of taking the GMAT or GRE or exams to get to business school and to become an executive. And one thing an executive has to do, regardless of what industry, is be able to assess the situation quickly, identify some of the patterns, but also bring that level of flexibility and new level of knowledge. That's all of what I'm learning right now in business school and what I did prior to it and after as well. And what you're referencing is the error log, right? So Magoosh, we really stress the error log. I actually wrote an article on the website about it. It's being able to take a moment of a wrong or right answer and understand every process that you got to that right or wrong answer and what do you switch, and then go back and review that question. So you are so spot on with like understanding, hey, what did I get right? What did I get wrong? And really doing self-reflection, because the MBA is all about self-reflection. So the test prepares you for it.
Yeah, and Derrick, I totally agree with you with that too. The GMAT, sometimes when I'm talking about just getting ready for the test, it might sound as if I'm only talking about skills that are valuable for this test. But as you said, obviously, they're testing exactly the skills that you're going to need to get through the MBA program and to function as an executive. And let me give one quick example, if I may. On the critical reasoning questions, they're frequently just asking you to identify an assumption. In other words, something that was implied but wasn't fully spelled out. It's super common that beginning students, without even realizing it, they fill in the assumption in their mind, like they think that the argument said it, but it didn't really. And when they're called out on it, they'll go, well, but it clearly implied, or, well, but the argument wouldn't have made any sense if they didn't say this part. And I'm like, see, you fixed it for them in your head. You found the mistake, then you fixed it for them in your head. And that's the key to the answer. You need to notice when you're doing that. Well, then what I like to point out is, someday when you're an executive, are you going to be the one who's going to notice that the contract or the business proposal that was brought to you has a gaping hole in it that you could drive a truck through? Or are you going to go, oh, well, I'm sure they meant to take care of that problem? No, so you're learning skills that you're going to need, at every step of your career.
I want to build right on top of something that both of you said, which is that by learning from your mistakes and understanding your strengths, you're also working from a place of growth mindset. You're also working from a place of understanding that this is all part of your journey and all part of moving forward and progressing, and not taking the back step of saying, I'm not smart enough, I can't do tests, this is an indication of who I am in the world. But actually, you can use the GMAT and the process through it as a marathon of your own self-development and engaging in a positive way. And so embracing that way of being is also an awesome opportunity that you're given by moving through the GMAT. And any test, really.
Yeah, and one thing I really want to say is I don't believe that anybody, if they take their diagnostic and they get a bad score, or they felt like I just have, what just happened? What was that all about? Or even let's say English isn't their native language. And so they're like, my goodness, it's hard to read these passages. How do I know which sentence is correct? Things like that. Nobody should conclude, oh, I don't have what it takes, because it is so possible to improve. It is just so possible to improve. And, I'm sure you've seen this, Derrick, too. People whose native language is not English can still get a good score on the GMAT. So this test is learnable, and you can improve. You can learn these reasoning skills. So nobody should just go, oh, I can't deal with this, So whatever you get, that's just your first step on the journey.
You guys have shared some really fascinating pearls of wisdom, real gems, and I want to thank you for it. You guys are clearly fantastic coaches, because not only the wisdom, but I'd say there's a certain calm in the way you share your ideas, and I feel ready to take the GMAT. So obviously, Magoosh and City Test Prep are both doing some really good things by hiring you, and really, really interesting. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap it up today, unless there's any final comments you're dying to share with the audience. But I mean, we could probably talk about the GMAT forever. At least you could. I could listen. But look, I want to thank all of you who listened today in the audience for joining us on MBA Waves. Of course, our guests, Karen and Derrick. It's been really interesting and fun having you today. And don't forget to join us next week on MBA Waves every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Paris time, 1 p.m. New York time, and 10 a.m. San Francisco time. We're going to be talking about alumni and getting to know them as part of your MBA journey, why it's important, and how to go about it. So thank you once again, and bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.